everybody knows and everybody is sensitive to it. The wonderful thing about this, which might have been happenstance, Damon, is that the wearing of the masks are not happening here today. Mm-hmm. I think there's something symbolic about that. And it has pulled us together in such a wonderful way that they're no longer, you wouldn't have to be brave about Holocaust anymore. It's out. So now we can grow. We can grow together the way it's supposed to be. We tell these stories and we come with a sigh of relief. I'm looking at you now, and there's a new family. There's a possibility of the new family, not just in this country, but in the world. Yeah. So it's very, in my mind, it's very poetically historical. Mm-hmm. So that's what I've seen and what I've gone through myself and others. It's very historical.
Trauma lasts, man. It gets in our bodies. It gets in our families. It gets in our makeup, our DNA, and we don't even know that we carry it. You know, my grandfather was born in 1886. My grandfather, you know, and I have no idea what kind of baggage and trauma that I'm hanging on. You know, so I'm always, you know, this show has really caused me to perk up. You know, to be attracted to conversations about trauma and trauma passed down, because those are some things that I have, but this show really put it out there and let people watch how that could very easily be passed down and be inherited and land in someone's lap today from an event that happened 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. You know, and so I'm very, very fascinated right now. My antennas really stand up when I start talking about, you know, the trauma and the events that my grandparents and other people's grandparents and ancestors have gone through, and how quickly we are to say, oh, that was so long ago, get past it, move past it. You're not affected by that anymore. No one's alive who went through those things anymore. But that's just really, it's just so it couldn't be more opposite, you know, of a reality for us, and so I'm glad that that we can use this show to remind me and to remind other people of that reality as well.
Mm. There seems to be a power that from the people from the Holocaust that I've spoken to, especially the elders, and the elders in the African American society, who remember their ancestors telling them of what happened to them, but the lynchings and all that stuff, and on the present circumstances, you think about it and you say, how did you overcome that? Well, that's the challenge of man, that you connect yourself with a power that helps you transcend all of that. So that as I was transcending that, and I told Regina's character the same story, that's what was behind those things. I'm going to tell you, so you don't have to feel that. It's the power of the Christians watching God carry a cross. It's deep and it's lasting, so that we can be healthy and happy and lead the way to the promised land rather than stay solid and stuff. You know the difference in those kinds of people. And so most of those people today are freed. They don't realize how they got there, but they're there.
Yeah.
That's the power of man. That's the power of the human being. You know, to go through a Holocaust like that and come out the other end because they've never been in charge in the first place.
I mean, I really feel like, Louis, what your character says in that scene, you can't heal under a mask. Wounds need air.
Yes, sir.
Such a perfect encapsulation of what we're all living through right now, and
yes, sir.
And what what it's all felt like, that we're airing out wounds that are fresh and wounds that are centuries old.
It's very strange that we're healing with a mask on.
Exactly. I do want to ask you, Louis. We realize by this scene that your character has basically had all of the answers, has known everything that is unfolded from the very first time we see him. And I'm wondering, did you know the answers from the very start too?
No, I was told by my great grandmama and my grandmother. They told me the story. It went. But something happens when elders tell you the story. Because my great grandmother, she only lied to me one time. She said, "It's going to hurt me more. It's going to hurt you." Now I know what she meant. Right? So I know what my great grandmother meant now. She saw all of the Holocaust, and she sat there in a rocking chair and spoke about stuff that it's hard for me to think about. The bottom line, because this is a television thing, is we're never going to be in charge. God is in charge. We have to be susceptible to that message. and transcend one generation at a time toward the way we're all supposed to be together. It's a promise. And so if we get that together, and we are, it's very exciting to be alive and watch.
And Louis, how much did Damon and the other writers sort of key you into what was in store for your character when you first signed on?
I told them I didn't read it, but I did. I did. I saw the looks on their face. Well, you didn't read it. But there's a character, that the elder character. It also happened in Boardwalk Empire. I don't know if you thought about that, but myself and Cicely Tyson, we elders might have something to offer this whole beautiful, brilliant part because of our ancestors and ourselves that you might not know. So I offered that wisdom through that character, something you might not have understood for what it was worth. And it turned out to be worth it. So it was good to do that with you.
For everyone else, including Hong and Jeremy, how much did you understand what was in store for your characters when you first signed on versus like where your characters ended up?
I think I knew quite a bit. Damon, when I first met with him, kind of told me the overall arc of Lady True's story. But of course, I really needed to be able to see the actual scripts. I read the first 4 episodes when I first signed on, and a lot of what happens with Lady True happens in the later episodes. And I remember being really excited that Jeremy Irons was going to be my dad. I knew that right off the bat. That was very exciting for me to get to work with Jeremy. I emailed Damon the night before we had our scene together, and I just thanked him for writing a nice juicy 6-page scene between he and I. So there was a lot to figure out. I really admire Javon being able to jump into that standalone episode because I remember doing that first scene where Lady True is introduced and not having any of the other major characters from the show participating in that and feeling a little bit, on my own and not really understanding if I was maybe carrying or doing service to what had already been set up in the prior episodes or the other work that people were doing. And it's a little bit of a challenge to jump in there and just kind of trust that it's all going to fit together. I'll let Jeremy also add to that.
I didn't know what was going to happen to the blonde man. I didn't really know who the blonde man was. I was led through like a child, really, by Nikki and Stephen and Damon, just doing what I was asked, but not really knowing why. So it was a mystery journey for me. It all came together at the end, but I don't think I knew about the last episode until a couple of weeks before we shot it. So I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And during a lot of my shooting, I had no idea where I was, who I was, why I was. And it became clear when I watched the program. But of course, I didn't know what was going on. The core of this wonderful bit of work is what was happening in Tulsa. And because my character didn't know that, because I was away elsewhere, I didn't read it. I thought, I don't need to know this. And it wasn't until I watched the program that I saw how it all came together, and it was glorious, and I was very, very proud to be part of it. But Ozymandias is in a different sphere, well, literally a different planet until the end. And I suppose there's great comparisons with how populations are controlled by such things as worrying about the Cold War, or worrying about the Chinese, or worrying about that keeps everybody occupied and sort of controlled. So I don't really feel that he is an intrinsic or was an intrinsic part to the meat and the power of this story. He was an interesting sideline. Damon, would you agree?
Of course, I agree with everything that you say, Jeremy. But it's also kind of astonishing for both you and Hong to say what you said, because from my vantage point, we had long conversations before you committed to take the role. Both of you required meetings and convincing, which is my favorite way of doing it. Like, what are your intentions, sir? And then you're off to the races. And so this is what I was started talking about earlier in the context of some of the conversations that Nikki and Stephen and I were having, where you attacked your roles with such confidence that the idea that you were sort of faking it until you were making it is crazy to me. And in your case, Jeremy, we actually, as you know, we block shot, all of your stuff in Wales as we were still figuring out where they were going to slot into the Tulsa storyline until, of course, the finale, where you came to Atlanta and then basically rejoined the Merry Band months later. And by then we had the opportunity to kind of see what you were doing. And to me, that's the most exciting part of the job, which is I don't want to over communicate with the actors, not because I think that it's Machiavellian to keep you in the dark, but it's so much more exciting to see what your take on the character is. And then for me to bend the story towards you guys versus creating this very tight suit of armor that you must fit into and is very restrictive. And I think that your take on Adrian Veidt is based on a lot of choices that you were making that we felt was in flow with the story that we were telling, but we learned a lot of things from watching you. And the same thing with Hong, who basically says she came in that first day and was like, oh, none of the other regular actors are around, but we got those dailies and we were like, this is the Lady True show. Like, she thinks this is her show. Like, I love it. Like, which you might not have been able to do, if the first scene that you did was with Gene and Regina, which was in the very same episode. And so, like, I love that the approach of every character thinks that they're the lead of the show. Because that's the way that the world works. No matter wherever you are on the realm of sort of narcissism, the world has to revolve around you to some degree. And, Watchmen is populated with a lot of, larger than life characters to that degree. And obviously, we had cast Jeremy before we cast you, right, Hong? Like, he was already locked and loaded. So I think that I reckon it already felt like you were related somehow. It's like, I don't know.
Well, I love to work like that. I mean, I don't necessarily need to know the whole arc of the story. I enjoy just working on the reality of the particular place, the particular scene one is doing, which I think worked for the Blonde Man.
We kept, as the writers, we kept waiting for you to call us and say, I'm launching people from a catapult, or you're going to make me sit in a courtroom for an entire day and all I get to do is fart. I won an Oscar. Like, but you took it on. It's amazing. I'm truly in awe, like, of everybody on the show. But like,
but my only disappointment in the entire program, I think, is that the fart wasn't long enough.
Well, you nailed it on the first take, and then you just ran out of gas.
All right.